Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I have my buddy Max. You can find him on Twitter at Power of Values. And by his name, we're going to be detailing how values can change our lives in a positive manner, allowing us to be our best selves. So, Max, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you.
Yeah, sure, man. Like I said before, I feel very honored to be invited on your podcast, and I think you've made some incredible content, and yeah, man, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
Uh, the content, it's just we can create a lot by ourselves, but by collaborating with others, it expands the reach and the ability to bring specific new value to others. So the first question we'll start with is, what prompted you to go so in depth with values?
Ah, so that's a great question. I think everything everything I do in my life currently is yeah, it's based upon those values. And the reason why I wanted to talk about that on Twitter as well is that I, yeah, I've been through a kind of difficult period in my life for the past 2 years. Well, I wouldn't say difficult, but it has been definitely challenging at times with, the whole situation in the world with the pandemic and stuff. Um, it has really opened my eyes to myself actually, so to what I find important in my life, and I actually felt motivated to share that message on Twitter and to actually inspire people to really look at themselves and at their lives and see, is it aligned with my principles, is it aligned with what I stand for. And if it is, then all good. I only made you think. But if not, I want to inspire you further to take action and to take responsibility for how you have created your life and how it's not benefiting you, and yeah, how you should maybe make some changes.
Wow. That it reminds me of multiple points of myself where I was in more of a darker, not dark. I don't want to say life's so horrible, but life is surely not easy. And the difficulty that we go through, it allows us to appreciate the simple aspects or the blessings that we receive. But it's so interesting how when we go through ruts or the challenging times, it is almost as if that was necessary to get us to a better place in both our minds and life in general. Because we can have important values, but these values are so meaningful because they urge us to take action and they urge us to look inwards. When we look inwards, that's when the real growth can occur. And just with so much distractions in the average person's life, it's almost as if we don't get the chance to really look inside until we come to that point of suffering and there's no other option.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that, and especially the last part. I actually came to the realization in the past few years that I was kind of living on autopilot. I was just, I had a job. I worked it for like 40 to 50 hours a week, and I would just party on the weekends, and that will be my life. And of course, there was fun in that. It's I had some incredible funny moments and some very light moments, but it made me think. The past few years made me think about like, is that really it? And
Right.
what is it actually that I stand for? Do I vouch for devoting half your life to one job? Is that something I stand for? Well, that was an easy answer for me. So yeah, I took a critical look at my life, and yeah, actually decided that that was not the case. And it inspired, it provoked a internal process for me, and I hope to inspire others to do the same, because I think it's, it's absolutely worthwhile to sometimes do the hard things and to really look truth straight in the eyes. And yeah, it will be difficult at first. You need to let go of a lot of things, but trust me when I say it will be worth it down the line.
It really is not something easy to inquire inwards and ask ourselves, is this all that is meant for us? And to actually reflect in a manner where we are seeking for truth rather than living in an autopilot state of mind. It's like you said, there is a lot of fun that can occur when we're partying and living just that type of lifestyle where you work Monday through Friday and you have fun on the weekends. But there just comes a point when something, you can call it the source, the universe, whatever, we are brought to the understanding that there is more for us and that we have the potential and capability to change others' lives. But it's not an easy thing to understand. It is, you have to go through those hard moments of just feeling frankly like shit. And once that occurs, all the good benefits of doing the hard work are realized. And it never comes easy. Doing the hard work is something that forces us to get uncomfortable. And it's fantastic how getting uncomfortable makes us stronger, more confident, and really changes the direction of our future in such a beneficial manner.
Yeah, I think that one of the um, how should I put this? Like, one of the hardest, but also most, um, yeah, one of the hardest pursuits in life is the one of resiliency. So mental resiliency, but just becoming resilient in general, physical, mentally, financially. Um, it is one of the hardest pursuits, but I think it's because it's the hardest. It's also one of the, well, it's the pursuit with the highest return on investment,
Mm.
because um, if you become resilient, I think sometimes I hear people talk about like self-discipline and how disciplining themselves limits them, right? I think you've heard that before as well.
Right.
And I think I think to an extent that can be true, but it's all dependent on how you how you discipline yourself. Like, if you're punishing yourself, that is that is discipline in a sense as well, but it's not the discipline you should look for. You should look for your own challenges, and you should challenge yourself regularly, because that builds resiliency. And if you the well, for me, the way I look at it is, the beauty of life is that if you don't look for those challenges yourself, life will give them to you. So I like to challenge myself so that I become resilient to life, to the outer world, and to the opinions of others, for example.
Oh,
So
that's amazing. Continue.
yeah, so I think that's also kind of where the name Power of Values came from, because I think that is the power of values. If you know your values, it makes you resilient in a sense because you can make decisions based on your values. So if you are confronted with a situation which demands quick action, if you have clearly defined your values, you will you will act in a different manner than if you haven't. Because if you haven't, you will be just kind of walking around like a headless chicken because you don't know what you find important in life. So if you are confronted with a unexpected situation, it will surprise you, and you will maybe do things that you don't agree with, and that's because you are not resilient to others' opinions, to maybe even manipulation, right? So yeah, that's where the name came from, and I think resiliency is something beautiful, but it's hard as well, which for me makes it incredibly beautiful.
There's something about doing hard things that when we know it's not easy, the return on investment is just substantial. I wanted to talk about the people pleasing and the inner turmoil that can occur when we do not have our values clearly defined. Oh man, it is rough, especially when we're younger, because I'm only 23, and when I was in high school, it was just so much trying to fit in because I didn't have clearly defined values that I had a lot of inner turmoil. I didn't really understand how or who I was. And that was just a quick thing I wanted to emphasize. But I wanted to ask you, what are some of the specific challenges that really made you look deeper into your own values?
Um, well, the greatest one for me was when the pandemic hit and all these what's the English word? All these measures were rolled out across the world, and you know whatever you think of them, that doesn't really matter. For me, I struggled with them, and I struggled with them because they didn't align with my morals, with my moral compass, and because they didn't align, I I was forced to. Well, first of all, I was forced to stay inside, so I had a lot of time with myself. So it forced me to think and to research what was happening in the world, but also in myself. And I think that has been the greatest challenge for me, and which provoked a process inside of me to search for my values. Because before that situation, like I said, I was living on autopilot. If you would have asked me what my values were back then, yeah, I don't know what my answer would have been, but it would have probably been something like a kind of vague answer, or maybe even a
Like
popular answer.
maybe
Um,
something quite materialistic as well.
Probably, yeah,
I
yeah,
found myself
good chance.
in that scenario as well. Um, you're not alone with that challenge of the pandemic. That there's a reason why suicide rates have skyrocketed ever since that has occurred. It's almost like there was an attack, a specific attack on humanity's mental health, and it's quite mind blowing how the mainstream lacks the education on the simplest aspects of health. They don't prioritize or emphasize our values. It's almost as if mainstream doesn't want humanity to have values. But there's it really intrigues me the point of being not average and how resiliency is so beneficial, almost because it is against the grain. When we become resilient to what others expect us or others' opinions of us, it allows the self to really come to terms with what we want, who we desire to become, and how our lives are, how we want our futures to unroll. And those are just a few questions that I often journal about. And it really helps me to stay grounded when, like you said, from the pandemic, we were forced to have so much time with the self. And it was a good thing for the people who really took advantage of it. But like I said, the suicide rates have gone up so much, and it's unfortunate. I think that's part of both of our purpose is to share the knowledge and the information so that the average individual can really feel fulfilled and understand what they want and who they desire to become.
Yeah, I totally I totally feel you on that because, um, like you said, the pandemic, and the fact that we have been forced to stay inside. Well, at least for me, it has been a blessing, and it's probably up until now, it has been the best thing that happened in my life, which probably sounds pretty weird, but I'm really grateful that it happened because I don't know how long I would have continued to live on autopilot, if it wouldn't have happened. Um,
Right. It's wonderful how sometimes at the first look or the first impression something is a curse, but those hard moments, they really get a lot out of us, and I can agree. It's at the beginning there was just I had to shift my mindset, and
Absolutely.
from from looking at the whole thing as something negative out of my control, I started to look and inquire inwards. Okay, what can I control? How can I make the best of today? No matter what rules or guidelines are being put in place, how can I control my actions and my thoughts? And oh my gosh, I really do feel similar. Getting out of autopilot was not easy, but it has been just a blessing.
And it's just once you see that, like doing the hard thing of taking responsibility and of focusing on what you can control, um, like freedom is on the other end, and that's what people often don't realize. Like in my surroundings, I see a lot of people, um, like go along with those measures, and because they are afraid to lose freedom. And like in some sense I understand, but on the other hand I feel like it's a false sense of safety, of security that they are been being lured into. And I feel blessed that I have been able to see the fact that taking responsibility actually equals freedom. um, and once you take responsibility for your own life, man, a lot of opportunities open up. Yeah, these past few months have been incredible in terms of Twitter growth, but just in general life growth in general, it's been incredible because I've just I've just come to so many great realizations, over the last few months. It's been incredible, and just just taking responsibility for my life and for what I want. And it's always the trade-off between freedom and security. So, for example, beginning of January, I quit my full-time job without having a new job to replace it. And what was actually, I was lucky because I had my girlfriend who could cover for me, so it gave me the freedom to pursue different avenues. But um, it was a decision that I had to make because I was so incredibly unhappy at my job that I was just afraid to leave because it gave me security, it gave me a paycheck, and like I said, I just took responsibility, and it was just a weight off my shoulders. But beforehand, I was afraid that um, it would be dangerous in a sense, that it would be imprisoning because I wouldn't have any money. But it actually turned out the complete opposite. It gave me freedom. It gave me freedom. It gave me mental freedom as well. Um, so yeah, I can't emphasize enough to take responsibility and to actually look at your life and yeah, just see what is it you value first of all, but also how do you see your future? Because if you if you know what you value, you will also know what you want your future to look like. And for me, my most important value is freedom, freedom of, well, everything you can think about, of place, of time, of speech, of financial freedom. But I think that just ties into the others. But that's the most important thing for me. So I just want to live in a way that I can be free and do whatever I feel like doing. And it sounds pretty simple, but I know for sure it's really hard to acquire that situation for yourself. But it's definitely a dream worth pursuing.
Yeah, a worthwhile venture for sure. I I directly understand how the values that one has correlates to freedom, and how challenging the venture of crossing that line of safety and security. And on the other side is when we are trapped within the prison of our minds, it's like doing anything but that 9 to 5 is just unimaginable. And we are so secure and not happy, but we're just secure. And it is a false illusion that tries to keep us in that state. But when we learn to be dependent on ourselves for how we carry ourselves, income, all of these aspects that are sort of supported by the 9 to 5, when you step out of that box, you realize that in your example, I am sure, so you've seen so much growth in your Twitter, which is fabulous. But I know the other part of that is the fulfillment that you're getting from completely knowing that you're helping and changing people's mindsets, helping them realize their values, which directly changes their future. And that is beautiful in itself, because now you're not just a simple pawn for a corporation, which I'm not against working for someone, but I am against working for someone and not enjoying what you're doing every day. So if you do have a 9 to 5 and you're fulfilled, you enjoy it, you know you're helping other people, hey, all the power to you. That is wonderful. But when we get stuck in the autopilot of working a job that does not help our mood or bring us any type of inner fulfillment, that's when we really have to take a step back. And like you said, once you realize those key values, which for you and me is freedom, that has to be the biggest one. Because if we can't speak what's on our minds, if we're not allowed to share our opinions and try really to build up other people, that is just, it's not a good mental place to be. something that happened to my father in his lifetime. It's crazy. I won't go too in depth, but I'll put it simply. He got trapped in the prison of his own mind, and that is one of the indirect things that has motivated me to speak so much and inquire inwards as much as I have, because I can learn from others' examples, and I saw what happened to him in such a negative way. It made me question why. How did that happen? And it was simply the lack of inner awareness and a lack of purpose or fulfillment.
Man, I can only imagine, well, what your father went through, but what you went through as well. And I can completely understand why something like that leads to you really wanting to speak up and to really value the ability and the freedom to speak up whenever you want and about whatever you want. And I totally agree that freedom, it happens to be my core value, but to be completely honest, I feel like it should be everyone's core value. And the reason for that is because I think the only birthright we are given when we come to this earth is freedom, and it should be something we actually see as some sort of sacred, if that makes sense. We should value freedom the highest of anything we are given, because yeah,
I think
freedom is everything you can do in this life. So let's say you want to start a business, or you want to help people, or yeah, you want to become your best self. I don't know, whatever it may be. Everything stands or falls with you having freedom or not. So if someone listening to this, or someone around the world actually is actually willing to give up, like consciously willing to give up his or her freedom in exchange for whatever it may be. And so in most cases it will be safety or security. If that is you, I think you really have to think again about what freedom actually means, because freedom is the greatest gift we're given, and it is something that will help you throughout your life.
there's a false sense of safety that is the trade-off for freedom, because
Absolutely. Yes.
freedom in itself is safety. If we are free to make our own decisions and use our minds in the way that one desires, that is safety and security.
Wow.
It doesn't have to be just in a physical sense. What I'm getting at is the false impression of threats is created for a reason. And I'm not of the opinion that there is no threats. Of course, there is danger in our world, but it is so over exaggerated in a way that we are giving up our freedom when it is our most important aspect. And once you give up your freedom, you don't get it back. So I really stand for the value of being an individual and letting the the population in general do what they would desire to do, because we're all unique and we're all different, yet we were created by the same source. And that source, it wants us to figure out what we were created to do. We all have a specific purpose, and it's our mission to look inside, ask the right questions, so that we can get on the direct route to accomplish what we were created to do.
Yeah. So, like you said, um, the complete exaggerated perception of threats is something that is, I think it's a real challenge for our free world, because I'm of the opinion that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And
Yes.
I think when you are thinking of a threat, you should always, or at least try to make rational decisions. And I think where we often go wrong as a species, but also as individuals, is when we make decisions based on emotions. And when you are making decision based on emotions, you are, well, you might make the right decision, but more often than not, you will make the wrong decision because your emotions will get the better of you and you aren't able to think straight. And if you would take a step back and look at the situation rationally and look at the facts, you would probably make a whole different decision, but it could be too late because you already made that decision in a rush, in a what's the word? In
A
a
panic.
Yeah, exactly, in a panic. Um, and I think, well, that ties perfectly back into understanding your values. If you have defined them and if you live them, it's not hard to make rational decisions because you know what you want and what you stand for. And if you know that, then whatever comes your way, you will be able to look at it rationally and don't panic and don't overreact, and think like, you know, this situation is very hard, but is it a lion that is coming towards me? Is it something that's going to eat me? If not, then cool, then I can think about it. And of course, there are situations in which you need to act immediately. I completely understand. And there are some situations for sure in my life as well in which I respond emotionally. I think that's human, but I think we should strive to make every decision rational, not emotional.
Yeah, I love that you wrapped it up with the fact that you still do make emotional decisions. It's not that we will be able to avoid them all the time, but
No.
right, and as long as we're clear on our values and understand that, it allows us to, when we feel the emotions running up, we almost immediately can catch ourselves. And that is the purpose of awareness. We're going, because that's just how humans are. We're going to be emotional. If someone says to me something that directly offends me or attacks me as a person, I immediately feel my emotions rising. But the awareness, the mental work that has been done allows me to almost immediately, 10, 15 seconds into that mental panic, I'm calming myself and realizing, okay, what do I value? Not other people's opinions, unless they're very important to me. Like someone like you, Max, I would value your opinion, but that is not the average Joe. You're someone who I can agree with on multiple aspects of life, and the average person, I don't want to say they're asleep, but oh man, there are a lot of people on autopilot, Max. And it's important for us to realize that those people on autopilot, their opinions, they cannot affect us because they haven't done the mental work and they haven't really pushed themselves to inquire inwards and do the hard tasks that make them their best self.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
you put what's
sorry.
up?
One one other point I wrote down was
Yeah, sure.
the lion and the amygdala. Our brain is wired to still create fear, like there when we hear back in the day, if we were hunters and gatherers and you see the brush moving or the grass moving, it could be a fight or flight situation. The amygdala in our brain is still wired, it's still there to create fear. But now we live in a society where there isn't lions running at us. And it's important to understand how fear is going to be created within our minds, but as long as we're aware of those negative or pessimistic thoughts and we can correct them, that's going to be a helpful action for anyone. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, sure, no problem. But I think that's a great point because there's a big difference between instinct and intuition, and on the other hand, your thoughts, because every human being has an instinct that will, like for example, if we smell fire, let's say at night you're sitting on the couch and you're just, I don't know, you're watching some show or you're reading a book, I don't know, and suddenly you smell a fire. There's not a moment in my life that I will not go like, hey, what's that? Like, I'll there isn't there's an instant when I think of fire and I think of it as danger. So I want to make sure it's not in my house or near my house. And that's something we all have inside of us, but it has been suppressed, and because of the overwhelming sensations of this world, we are made to think so much about each situation, and well, we even have a term for it, which is like an overthinker. And yeah, I'm happy to say that I'm not an overthinker myself. I'm very blessed with that, but I know a lot of people who are, and I think it's, like I said, it's I think it's a natural consequence of this modern world, that we have so many stimuli in this world, like phones, social media, well, people wanting your attention, useless
Abundance.
opinions.
An abundance of food. There's so many choices. What do I eat?
Also, yeah, of course, yeah, of course, and it just, yeah, that's the perfect word for it. That abundance makes people literally go crazy because they don't know what to choose anymore. And even if you have your values defined, like myself, I still struggle with that a lot because there's are so many choices sometimes that you don't know which is the best. And even if you feel inside you like this should probably be the choice I'm going for because it feels the best, it aligns with my values, there are still good second and third options because you can think rationally, and you can um, yeah, you can tell yourself why they are good options, and that makes it just very difficult. Like that is something people should realize, that it is still difficult to make decisions even if you have your values defined. But it doesn't mean that you should let go of your values because there are so many options. I think you can make your life a whole lot easier if you know what you want.
It is very, very challenging with so many choices, even if we do understand our desires or journal about what we want. There's always, like you said, that second option that is okay. And I love the idea of going all in with whatever it is that your gut is telling you, or it's very hard. I've struggled with making decisions as well because the abundance of options. And if I wanted, I could easily live a life on autopilot that grants me plenty of money, plenty of an abundance of resources. I could go out to eat whenever, do all these fun things. But what really gets me is, where are we going to get or derive our fulfillment from? The idea of having a purpose and realizing that each human is here for a specific reason, that's really helped me, because serving others, I've really noticed that it not only makes me feel so good to help others, but to see that I have improved another's life, I can't even put into words how those emotions or feelings help me. It's such a fantastic thing. And one question I have is, what actions can I take to understand my values?
Oh, that's a great question, actually. I wanted to get back on something you said, which actually ties into this question quite well, I think. Um, and that was that we all have a gut feeling, and that is something I have really learned the past few years, and I'm still learning about that, and still, yeah, mastering tuning into my gut feeling. Because how do you know if something is your value? I think it's because you will feel it. I'll, um, yeah, you will feel it, but it's the challenge is where it's challenging to actually tune into that feeling. I think that's where the challenge lies, because we all have a gut feeling, that's for sure, but we just don't all know how to really utilize it, and how to um, tune into that gut feeling. So if I were to give one advice, it was to experience. Well, that's actually two pieces of advice. It is to experience different things, and whilst you are experiencing them, so whilst you are exposing yourself to challenge, to new conversations, new opinions, which could give you challenge because something could trigger you, for example. If you expose yourself to these impressions, you will feel what is right and what is wrong for you. But you just have to train yourself to feel these things. And if you feel these, then you will be able to define your values, no doubt.
That's powerful. It is never like a clear line in the sand of what
No,
is the difference between our gut and our ego, but it's kind of a intuition that is carved out with personal experience and over time. I love the saying, nothing great happens overnight. It's this continuous venture of getting in tune with our inner self, because it's evident that each human, we do have the ego, but then we have the deeper sense of ourself. And the autopilot is almost like we're living in a state of just 100% ego. And it's not really easy to differentiate between the two. It really takes time and silence, whether you're going to journal, meditate, go for a walk in nature, or read any of these activities, or like right now, having a conversation where I'm truly just in a flow state. I'm not thinking of anything but the conversation. And that allows me to get more in tune with myself rather than the ego, which wants girls and cars and all the things that have been imprinted into our vision of success or what the average human is supposed to do in their life.
Yeah, so I I think you said that perfectly, because like for me, wh- the the way for me to really rediscover my gut feeling was, like you said, having conversations, and having conversations with people that were like-minded, but also conversations with people, um, who didn't think like I did, and those gave me certain internal challenges, and those triggered a feeling inside of me, and I just learned how to feel. Actually, that's really it, actually. And it may sound, and it did to me at first as well, a bit, um, yeah, a bit magical in a sense. But
Wishy-washy.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Wishy-washy. I think that's I think that's an excellent term for it. But I think it really is not, because it's feeling like through your gut what you think of something. Um, it's just how we are ancestrally wired. It's not wishy-washy. It's just science in a sense. So, um, I think, like, I don't have the scientific sources to back that up right now, but the guts is connected to the brain. So if you don't take care of your gut, you will indirectly don't take care of you will indirectly not take care of your brain as well. So I think that's something people often forget. If you, um, let's say, drink a lot, or if you eat a lot of McDonald's, for example,
Oh,
this will
perfect. Perfect
this this
example.
this will ruin your gut, but this will ultimately also ruin your your connections to your brain. So you won't be able to feel as well, um, yeah, how you think about situations. And like I said, you will feel how you think, and that's I think that's um, I think it's the same with like smell and taste. They are connected as well, and I think that's the same with feeling and thinking. You will you will get a your body will respond to a situation, to a conversation, or a physical challenge, with stress, for example. Because when I was having conversations with people who didn't think like I did, I would tense up. I would my breath um, um, would stop.
I,
I would literally stop breathing for a few seconds, and then I would like think to myself like, oh damn, I stopped breathing, so I need to breathe, and then I would let go, and it would just happen over and over again until I realized what was happening, and it was just my body tensing up every time, and it well, in my experience, that is through your gut feeling, because I just felt some sort of danger in a sense, and it wasn't real danger, but it was a threat to um, my opinion, and that would make me tense up. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that your gut feeling, is really connected to your brain, and to take care of your brain, you should take care of your gut.
I really liked a lot of what you said there. The point about when you were speaking to someone who, whether their opinions don't go with yours, there's a fine line for me where if I'm speaking with someone who disagrees with me, but we can have a respectful, kind conversation, I could stay in a flow state. But if I'm in a conversation with someone who is more of battling with me and being rude and inconsiderate and truly close-minded, it's hard for me to stay in that environment. I almost really want to get out of there as soon as possible because the energy that they're putting out it's like indirectly attacking how I feel, and it puts me in not a good mood. But I wanted to speak on what we eat and how that affects our brain. When someone, for example, goes to Wendy's, it's not only that you're destroying your gut, but you're attacking your ability to think and process at your maximum capacity. When you eat that food, it is compared to a foggy brain. Your level of thinking is just greatly diminished, and that's something that I don't think people understand. And ever since I've been on this journey of self-inquiry and trying just self-education in general, I've noticed not only do I feel better, but my brain is working in such a way that it's like I upgraded my brain. And it's completely, it's surprising. I didn't foresee this occurring, but oh man, am I enjoying it.
But I mean, only imagine that there are people out there who will never experience that state in their lives because they just, like you said, they just go to Wendy's on the daily, which ultimately means that they are numbing themselves for life, and they never get to experience their full mental capacity. And yeah, like you said, I think I experienced that as well whenever I eat something that is high in refined sugars. It's just it's just it feels like some sort of overload for my brain. I get when I eat that stuff. I think I get triggered way easier. I'm way more um, emotional. I can't control my emotions as easily, um, and I'm not able to really feel. And that's, yeah, I think that's something to really think about whenever you making a decision for food.
You just reminded me of how everything in our bodies is connected. How the taste and smell correlate, the thinking and what we consume correlates. It's something that I wish I knew at a younger age, because with that knowledge that almost everything is intertwined, it gives us an awareness that, and if I'm about to, and like we talked about the first time, it's not that you can't have a donut or you can't have ice cream. It's just we have to be very conscious of overindulging. My first guest I had on the podcast, Susie, she worked at Google, and it was a great conversation. Something she mentioned was how when she has one piece of whatever it is that brings her joy, it's fabulous. But once you indulge in something and overdo it, it's crazy how
Mm.
the things that bring us joy can sabotage us when we overdo it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think you mentioned that when we first spoke as well. Like, that's a challenge of diminishing returns, which we sometimes forget or just refuse to understand. And I'm guilty of that myself sometimes as well. Um, like indulging, it's just like I think I have a pretty obsessive mindset, in a sense that when I like something, I'm going all out. So that goes for everything, but like working out, eating, but also writing. Um, it goes for Twitter as well. I mean, if I'm really so I have weeks when I'm not really into it, and I just post my tweets and I'm out of there. But I also have weeks when I'm really into it and I start researching topics and I'm writing endless amounts of content and just writing thread after thread. And I think that's something that is a blessing, but it can be a real challenge at times too. And I think that's just the like we talked about in the beginning. That's just the internal process that I hope everyone goes through at some stage in their lives. If it can either be in your teens or in your 20s, but it could also be in your 50s. I mean, just go through it, and if you will go through it, then a better life is on the other side.
You really took the words out of my mouth with that idea of what we do. It's wonderful to go all in, whether weightlifting or the food you eat or the style of work that you do. It's amazing to go all in, but we must understand that there is a fine line and there's a balance between overdoing things, and it's something that is going to be different for each person. I love the idea that we're all created by the same source, yet we have so many different unique situations, environments, personalities, and characteristics within the individual's circle. And that's why conversation for me is something that is just fabulous. It allows me to learn and hear about others' experiences, which sometimes might correlate to mine. But on the other hand, I can always learn and pick up things because each individual's experience is going to be a bit different.
Absolutely. Well, like you said, we are all connected through the same source, and whatever you believe that source to be, whether it be God or, well, I don't know what sort, what other sources there
Yeah,
are, but I
right,
think
exactly. Whatever
but it,
sources.
it doesn't matter. I think if you really start to feel, you will feel that, especially that, well, that's the way I feel, is that we are a part of nature. Well, we are nature, and I think that's why people experience nature to be so calming, because it's just going back to your roots, really. So that is something I really need to do more of, because I do that way too little, and I think it could really benefit my life. And I would really advise others to do that as well. I think nature can really teach you something about yourself, and it will create a calm space for you to think in, and especially if you live in a busy city, that's hard, man. It's hard to think clearly, because especially if you're living in, like, I don't know, a student home, you never really have a moment of silence in your life, and I think that's detrimental to your mental health. It's definitely overlooked.
That's a big piece of what I see as a root problem in my generation specifically, is the codependency and the lack of being an individual, getting silent with yourself, whether it's putting in headphones and meditating, reading a book maybe before everyone wakes up, or getting out in nature and going for a walk. But there is an amazing realization that occurs when we do get quiet. And it's hard for me to witness how often or how many people never get that moment of silence. And I think it's a very hard challenge to work on, because when people are not even aware of how much silence, nature, or just getting away from that codependent environment will benefit them. And don't mistake me, I definitely think we all need a support system, and we benefit so much from personal collaboration and the sharing of ideas and knowledge. But there's a fine line, because if you never get time by yourself, you become so codependent that you can't be enjoying yourself alone, and that is detrimental to the mental health.
Yeah, and I think that that ties back into um, the freedom aspect as well, because people will, because they aren't in tune with who they are and what they think is important in their life. Um, they will feel like being alone is like imprisonment, because they are alone with their thoughts and they just don't like their thoughts. So in that case, they need to be with others, with other people, so they don't have to think. Um, really, I think that's the essential part, because freedom is also to not need anything or anyone. I think that's freedom as well, and that's often something people forget. Um, if you are happy by yourself, no matter the circumstances, you are a free individual, no matter the circumstances. So I think there are many great stories about that, but I think I can't remember the name of the book. I haven't actually read it myself, but I heard about it. I think there's actually a book written by a guy who um, was actually in a concentration camp, and he actually writes about how he could see like positivity in every situation, and that actually um, going out into the cold and
Uh,
working was actually better than yeah, of course, going into the gas chambers.
So I have the book, it's on my shelf. It's Man's Search for Meaning,
Ah,
right?
yes, that's the book I meant. Yeah, exactly.
Amazing, amazing. I haven't finished it yet, but oh my gosh, it's a beautiful aspect of perception. How he
Perception, exactly. Yeah.
oh man. And I was so, when you brought that up, I'm like, I can't even put it into words how I felt, but it's so funny how these older books of the past are so powerful. And when people take in that information, it really can change and shift your mindset. It's absolutely beautiful how in such a horrible scenario that he was able to perceive things in the way that he did. Um, what what is one piece of guidance that you would have loved at a younger age?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think, and that's just on the top of my head. Um, I think that would be to pursue happiness instead of fitting in. So always prioritize your happiness, whatever that may be, in whatever way you find happiness, whether it be um, pursuing your purpose as a writer, or a working a 9 to 5 that you really love, whatever it may be, as long as it brings you happiness, that's the only thing that matters. And you should always prioritize that thing over other people's opinion, because those opinions don't matter in 5 minutes, let alone 5 years, or maybe it takes 5 hours for you. I don't know, but people will always have an opinion. So therefore, you should focus on what brings you joy, and don't care about what others think. And if I would have learned that at an early stage in my life, it would have meant I would have probably defined my values earlier. I would have probably look for things that make me happy earlier, and trying less to please others.
Right, and that directly leads you to pursuing what your intuition or gut really is looking for. And
Exactly.
that was just really well said. Before we end off, oh my gosh, this was such a good conversation. One thing that I would love for you to give just what you define freedom as. What is the big outlook, or how can you best define what freedom means to you as it being your core value?
Excellent question, Justin, by the way. That's
Thank
great.
you.
I would define freedom as having the means to say no. And I think that's essentially what freedom is, and it's also it's so incredibly important in this day and age that you can say no to something that you don't want, because I see a lot of yay sayers around, and I think that's eating them up. And for me, like we talked about earlier, the the measures, for example, that were rolled out, I didn't agree with them, but I didn't have the means to say no because they were forced. And that's something that really spiked this sense of true freedom. And what really spiked a search for what is it of, or what does freedom really mean. So I think that's how I would define freedom. I think I could do a whole podcast on just freedom. I think it's incredibly interesting, and I think it's an incredibly it's a difficult topic because it's pretty complex. Because what is freedom in essentially? Um, but I think freedom isn't freedom if there are conditions tied into it. So if you have, um, for example, if you can go to, so we were talking about these measures. So if you can go to the pub, if you do certain things, then and that's you are sold, that this will give you your freedom back. I wouldn't call that freedom. I think that's just a false sense of freedom.
Yep,
And
manipulation.
manipulation, I think that's an excellent word. And I think everyone should strive to not be manipulated, and to build your mental resiliency, and to define values, define your boundaries as well. And I think having the means to say no to something that you don't agree with is true freedom. And I think that's something we all should strive for.
There is immense power in being able to say no. I would never want to be surrounded by yes men. It's important to have those people who will be honest with you, and when you don't want to do something, the people who can say no. But I loved your point on you could do a whole podcast on freedom. Maybe one day in the future I have you back on and we do exactly that.
Sure, man. I would love that. Absolutely.
It was just such a pleasure speaking with you. I have enjoyed the conversation so much.
Me too, man. Thank you for having me on. Like I said, I think these are topics that need to be spoken about way more, and there should be honest conversations about these topics, and there shouldn't be
A veil or a mask or any sort of,
exactly,
right?
exactly. We should be able to to speak honestly and to speak our hearts, and to eventually tune into your gut feeling and feel what you stand for, and to, yeah, live by that eventually.
Right. It's you cannot underestimate the importance of knowing our values. And yeah, I am grateful. Really, this conversation I'm sure will be able to help people, and those who listened will learn from it. It was just full of so many good ideas and concepts. Wow. I appreciate your time so much, Max.
Not a problem. I hope it will inspire the people who listen to this as well. At least that is the intention of talking about these topics, and I hope my words inspired some.
Right, and it's helping us at the same time reinforce our
For sure.
values. And well, you can't really beat that when you're helping yourself and others at the same time. That's a win-win.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Max. Enjoy yourself.
Yeah, you too, man.
I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, man.
Bye.
Bye.